This one. Victoria.
I'm so sorry.
You have to sit in this one.
Oh, I have to sit in this one. I'm in the wrong chair.
Sorry.
Hola. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, well, welcome. Molt bon dia a tothom. Benvinguts al Festival 42 i gràcies.
Welcome to the 42 Festival. Thanks for coming to see and to talk to Victoria.
With you, about yeah, that's probably my boss being.
Yeah. I hear you in translating.
We will
in there
use that
too.
later. No worries. I think that all of us are here today because we ended reading one of your books because you write a lot. We love everything you write. We love your darkness also. So we will be getting into deep from a few of your characters, but also we want really to focus on your last release because it got published this year. I'm going to say the title in Spanish because I didn't look how it is in English. Que entierren nuestros huesos en la medianoche. So there's a lot of type of creators that you created in your stories, but in this one, we talk about vampires and the pass of the time. So how was for you writing about vampires and also making it happen around Spain because a lot of scenarios are in Spain. How was that?
I mean, it was incredible. The lead, I'll call her the main character. There are three, but the character without whom
Maria.
The story would not happen. Maria, Sabine, as she becomes, is obviously from Spain. She is an open flame. I wanted to write a character who was all heat, but not necessarily warmth, because specifically I wanted to write an angry woman. I wanted to write a vengeful woman. I wanted to write a passionate woman. And I think so often as women we're expected to be soft, to be warm, to be gentle heat on which you can comfort yourself. And I thought, oh, I want an open flame of a woman. And so I knew I had to make her Spanish. I was like, this is perfect, right? Addie is quintessentially French. She is very soft. She is very kind. She is very passionate, but it's a gentle passion. But for Maria, I was like, we're going somewhere else. And I've been lucky enough to tour in Spain for the last decade and have fallen in love with it so much that I had to give a moment's love to Maria and to this country. I have wanted to write about vampires for as long as I can remember. But I debuted my first novel in 2011. And right around that time, there was a little book you might have heard of that was having a moment called Twilight.
Yeah, we've been through that. Great
book, but not my kind of vampires. Twilight, if you think about it, it's extremely sanitized and it's extremely straight. And I wanted to write a love letter to Anne Rice, to a different generation of vampires, to looking all the way back to the underpinning of vampire literature, to Carmilla, and The Vampire and Dracula, these are very canonically queer books. Vampires represent a defiance of gender norms, of sexuality norms, of societal norms. They represent a kind of not only carnal knowledge, but freedom. So I knew I wanted to write a queer immortality story, a lesbian immortality story, and I knew it had to be vampires for that, not only because they represent an intersection between horror and romance, but because of that canonical queerness. And I was thinking about how to make a woman feel free. And I was thinking about the fact that so many of us, not just women, not just the queer community, but so many of us, by virtue of the body that we live in, when we step out into the world, we are seen as prey. The world treats us like prey. And so I thought the way to make the queer women at the heart of this book powerful would be to make them predators. To strip them of the fear that they have to hold about the body that they possess, about the life that they possess. And there's a moment in the book when Alice
goes to the club.
And she gets labeled as prey, but there's also a moment where she has to eat somebody for the first time. Deeply inconvenient. And she puts herself into a situation that would have been historically unsafe, right? And she has a reflexive moment sitting in a car with this man where she is like, I am frightened because I am in danger. And then she has a radical realization. Oh, I don't need to be scared of him. He needs to be scared of me.
Yeah.
And I cannot think of any greater power or freedom that I could give the young queer women in this book.
I have to say that that scene really frightened me when I was reading it. But each of the characters, when they have to experience, this first time, the first person they have to kill once they become a vampire, is not an easy thing. And actually, Sabine, the first person who kills, it's kind of surprising because it's the one that actually gives her the freedom she was praying to have, she was asking for. And well, I was reading actually this last book. I thought this smart way you have to give freedom to some of your characters, that is giving them this immortality, that they can live forever if they please, to be that free.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it really condemns them.
Of course.
So, for example, when we learn how an actual vampire dies in your story, it can be killed.
Yeah.
Or they lose themselves. Like, they ended losing their heart, their purpose, they don't
rot.
longer know who they are.
Yeah, this is the thing, is like, immortality is nothing without cost. Like, I never really vibed with Superman, right? Like, Superman is essentially like, can just take kryptonite out of it for a second as like an element. Superman can just like keep going.
Yeah.
Forever. Whereas if you look at a character like the Flash, if he runs too fast for too long, he will essentially faint because he has used up all of his nutrients. There has to be a stop. There has to be a threshold. There has to be a cost. Power without cost, deeply uninteresting to me. Deeply uninteresting. Power with cost, fascinating, because then it becomes a very human question of what you're willing to do and where you're willing to go and how you're willing to push yourself. So all of my immortals always have a cost. There's another element there, though, which is that I am so disinterested in apathy. Apathy is a weird thing because it's so often given to immortals. An immortal will live for hundreds of years and be like, oh, I'm just so bored. I just don't want to do it anymore. Then don't, dude. Yeah. Like, here's the thing. I've yet to read an immortality tale that didn't have an out button. Like, if it's a vampire, a classic one, okay, stake yourself. Walk into the sun. Unless you create a logic system wherein that's not physically possible for you, okay, pay somebody else. Like, if you truly want out, you can get out. The question becomes then, why do you stay in? That was the question in The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. When I started to write Addie, I wrote her the way we write all immortals, which is that she's tired and she doesn't want to do it anymore. And I got about halfway through the first draft when I realized it doesn't hold water. It doesn't work because Addie has her hand over the out button and all she has to do is press. All she has to do is raise her hand and say, Luke, I don't want to do it anymore. So then the question becomes, how badly do you want to stay alive? And so for me, that's where passion comes into it. All of my immortals have to be willing to weather the cost for the reward. So yeah, there is a cost. In the vampires that I've written, their heart has to be destroyed, or they live long enough to rot inside. And what happens when they rot inside is they essentially become animals. They become hunters.
Crazy, yeah.
They just become predators in the most animalistic sense, and animals don't always have self-interest. The hunger is greater than the self-interest, and so they essentially damn themselves.
They are cruel without a purpose.
Exactly. They're sloppy
yeah.
murderers.
Yeah.
They become haphazard. They become sloppy because they become overly confident in their predatory hierarchy, in the fact that they are the strongest thing alive. So yeah, I'm really, no matter what I write about, whether it's ghosts, demons, old gods, vampires, which is, I'm excited by the human component of them, not the supernatural component.
Well, actually, what makes the difference between a beast and a human, it's this empathy, this humanity we have, this something, second thought about, oh, before I do this, I should, back up, because this is not the solution. And something that we love is actually you let us meet Maria. We really understand her thoughts. We really understand why she needed this change to get out. We then meet Charlotte. Alice, sadly, was the only one that maybe was not looking for this, but you gave us these different perspectives of how badly they want to live, but sometimes the cost is maybe expensier than they always thought.
It is, but at the same time, we don't always choose everything that happens to us in life. Alice is an example of, she doesn't choose this. I would also argue none of the three women are essentially given the whole spiel. They're not given a full explanation of what they're getting into, right? Even the closest is Maria, and it's still a very guarded language. She's not really told what she's getting. Charlotte, again, not really told what she's getting. Alice, never told. We are dealt cards, and we learn how to play the game with them or lose the game with them. Alice is a hugely reactive character. Things keep happening to her. But the thing I love about that is if you keep acting and acting and acting on a reactive character, they will either shatter or become active. They will eventually recoil. And that was the thing I wanted to explore with her. The cost is high. The cost should be high for the freedom, for the power. The question is is it worth it? I would argue for Maria it is, because if Maria had not become the vampire Sabine, she would have been burned as a witch.
Yeah.
Maria did not have a long, happy human life ahead of her. Maria spent the first 18 years fantasizing about murdering the people in her life. She was already on this road. Maria, we're going to talk around it so as not to spoil.
She needed an excuse to do it.
But also, the way that Maria becomes Sabine is very telling about Maria as a character. As you said, her first death, her first killing, her first act happens way before anyone expects it to, and not in the way anyone expects it to. And it's because that is a telltale marker of the kind of vampire she is going to be as Sabine. Each one of their transformations, from Maria into Sabine, from Charlotte into Lottie, from Alice into Bones, they are really foreshadowing moments for the kind of immortals that they're going to become. And I would also, again, I'm talking around, and no spoilers, I would caution you to think of the ending of this book as the beginning, because this is in so many ways the origin story for a villain. One woman in this book starts out as a villain, one becomes a villain, one ends up a villain.
That's a great way to actually describe your characters. At the long of the book, I couldn't not feel that the story was mainly meant to be told by the characters, that it was not, the focus wasn't the environment, wasn't the general scenes. You really, really wanted to develop the characters and even create this empathy with the reader, because sometimes when you read, you're like, oh yeah, no, she's losing herself. I'm kind of enjoying it, but at the same time, you could understand her. I want to say how you actually plan to write such a deep characters and put all them together in just one book.
So I like to jokingly say this is 3 novellas in a trench coat. So what happened is this is 3 women's stories. And each story is told by the individual woman. And so there's a narrative order to the book. This is the order in which you all read the story. You meet Maria 500 years ago, and then you jump forward. You meet Alice now, then you jump back, you jump sideways. That's the narrative order. That's not how I write it, though. I plan the entire book in the narrative order, and then once I have every single scene in the narrative order, I break it apart into the chronological order that each of the 3 women lives it. So from the moment we meet Maria when she's 10 years old to the moment we leave her point of view on meeting Charlotte. The moment we meet Charlotte when she's 16, the moment we leave her perspective that she's given to Alice. The moment we meet Alice, all of her flashbacks to the moment we leave her. And then I write each of the perspectives in its entirety. So I sat down and for 4.5 months, I wrote Sabine. I wrote her entire evolution as a character. And I did this because her story takes place over almost 500 years, because I wanted to hold her voice, because I wanted her to be the main character of her own story, and because of what we talked about earlier, the characters rot. And that means that there is a point in the story in which each of the 3 women becomes an unreliable narrator. There is a point at which you can no longer trust, and you have to remember these are 3 subjective versions of the truth. And it happens to at least 2 of the 3. And the rot is a really personal thing for my vampires because it can take days, it can take decades, or it can take centuries. So you as the reader are left to determine what is the moment at which Charlotte, for instance, becomes an unreliable narrator of what happened. Because you're not getting that story from anyone else's perspective at that point but hers. Just as you're not getting Sabine's from anyone's but hers, you're not getting from Alice's from anyone but hers. Because I wanted you to lock in with each of the 3 characters and realize that you are not being given the whole truth. You are being given their truth. And that is one of those love letter elements to Anne Rice, because I remember reading Interview with the Vampire, which is Louis's truth, and then reading the next book, The Vampire Lestat, and realizing there is no objective truth, even when an author is pretending. You are almost always being given a subjective truth from a character's perspective, and it's really fun because everyone sitting in this room right now is going to have a different memory of today, and every one of them is real. And then as an author, I get to pick, I have an opportunity to not only tell you a story, but to tell you a story bound to the lens of an individual character's experience of reality.
I have to say that I don't know how you do it, but you've done it mostly with Charlotte at that point that she is telling the story of how Sabine loses herself. That there were some moments that was like, I don't know if I have to trust you. Maybe you wanted to leave.
Exactly.
But you didn't find a way, so you came up with this in your mind. Maybe she's been through some, because there were so traumatic scenes with Sabine before she decides to run away. But there was a moment I was like, it's hard for me actually to truly trust you because...
Good.
I don't know, it's kind of, it was messed up, and at the end I really could understand why Alice did what she did.
Here's the question. Here's the question left in the mind if you've already read the book. What was in Charlotte's bag? That's the thing. What was in Charlotte's bag? Because Alice thinks it's one thing, and you never find out if it wasn't. And what's in Charlotte's bag determines how that entire scene is meant to play out versus how it does play out. And also, Charlotte is the least reliable of the 3 narrators because Charlotte does not see herself as anything but a victim of the circumstances. Charlotte does not take responsibility for anything that she was a participant in.
Yeah.
So you're right. You don't get Sabine's version of what happened in those years. You get Charlotte, who wants to be a sympathetic character, giving a version of the story. Now, maybe it's the truth. Maybe it's the truth as Charlotte lives it. But she is the most unreliable of the 3 narrators because Sabine is never lying to herself. Maria becomes Sabine. Maria is her name when she's human. Sabine is the name she takes after she becomes a vampire. Sabine, let me back up one second. These three women represent three versions of my own identity. Alice, young, has no idea who she is or who she wants to be. Charlotte knows who she is and is terrified of not being loved for it. Sabine knows who she is unapologetically. No fucks given, right? Just, she's living it. She's vibing it. She's having a great time. Sabine is the least interested then in being an unreliable narrator because Sabine has no reason to. Charlotte has every reason to couch herself in a nicer light.
And actually, it's the first thing that she does when Alice goes to her, why you did what you did.
Yeah.
She's like, I have no more options.
Yeah,
She's
she
like,
says
yeah,
it
you
wasn't
did
me.
have, you had more options before you do this to me.
Yeah.
And she was coming up with excuses and
Charlotte
the whole
says, I didn't
flashback.
do it. That's what Charlotte says.
Yeah.
I didn't do it.
Yeah, that was a lie. So apart from your characters, Victoria, that you always do a great job with that, you always create characters that we can feel really relied on. Something that always amazes me in your books is the scenarios and how you make us not just travel around the world, but back in time.
Yeah.
How is that? How do you document all of this? How you decide to make, for example, Adi LaRue go from French to New York? In this case, in your last novel, we traveled around the old Spain to this day. We traveled around Italy. We went to New York again. You make us travel a lot. We had also London in some of your series.
Yeah.
How you come up with all these places?
I think that setting is a character. I think that setting should be a character, but I also, I have an issue as a reader. Because the thing is, I'm a reader, right? Every writer should be a reader. And as a reader, I have a pet peeve when a character does not feel like they were grown out of a place. When a character feels like they're floating on top of setting and the setting is just there for convenience, the fact is, whether you love where you came from, or you hate where you came from, or you rebel against it, you are a product of it. You are a reaction to it. You are a result of the environment, the soil in which you were grown. So I try to look at place and time as that soil, and it has to be that the characters feel inextricable from it. They can change and move away from it, but Maria is who she is because she lives on a pilgrimage route, because she constantly sees other lives moving past her, coming and going. She is an absolute product not only of the time, but of the place. Charlotte is an absolute product not only of her time, but of her place in a very, very prudish, puritanical society that is telling her to hide everything that she is. Alice is a product of her place and a rebellion of it. She is trying to leave her place and her time behind. So I try to make sure that it feels very organic and very driven and not arbitrary in any way. But then oftentimes I'm looking at the realistic navigability, the ability to navigate a place. So for Addie, there's a reason that Addie doesn't go very far. Addie never wanted to leave France. Addie is a quintessentially young French woman. She wanted freedom. She didn't want to go travel the world. In fact, the first time Addie leaves France is when Luke takes her out of it and drops her in Italy. And the question is that a cruelty or is that a kindness, right? He does that during the French Revolution. Is he removing her from the immediate danger, or is he simply kicking her out of the house, right? From there, she is faced with the navigability problem of how to travel as a young woman by herself. She might be forgettable, but she is only forgettable once she leaves the room. She still has to. She has no passport, no identity, no documents. And so I chose routes for her that if I were in that position, I would see as the most feasible, but also she's so attracted to art and culture that I tried to line up that travel scheme with when these artistic movements and kind of renaissances are happening in different places. So hers is very logic driven. In this book, some of it was joy. Some of it was I knew the kind of set piece I needed for Sabine when she meets Matteo and Alessandro, and I thought Venice, perfect. Because when she meets Matteo and Alessandro, she learns how to hunt.
Yeah.
She learns how to draw it out into a game. Matteo is trying to teach her this to make her a better vampire.
And how to hide herself
exactly.
in the daylight. Yeah.
And the Venice Carnival felt like the absolute perfect hunting ground to play that first game in. And so some of that is that I knew what each era meant for Sabine. And so I knew where I wanted to set her in it. Mm-hmm. I will say, I am a fantasy author, not a historian. I do my best to be as historically accurate as possible. But I reserve the right to make decisions because I like how it affects the story. And an example is, I have amazing copy editors who point out whenever there's a historical inaccuracy, they bring it to my attention. And we have a word in publishing called STET, S-T-E-T. And that is the word you do when you override a note. It essentially is like, thank you, but no. And I was copy editing this book, and I saw a note from a copy editor. There's a scene in which Sabine and Hector and Renata massacre a church. They come upon a congregation, they massacre everybody, they have a delightful feast for themselves, they interrupt a mass. And afterwards, Sabine is sitting on the steps, and she is thinking about how wonderful the notes of sacramental wine were in the blood, just enjoying herself, having a nice time. Enter copy editor. Based on the time period and the order of Catholic Mass in Spain at that time period and the time at which they interrupted the ceremony, they would not have gotten to the sacramental wine at this point in the evening. Therefore, there would be no notes of sacramental wine in the blood. It is historically inaccurate. Enter me. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for your incredible attention to detail. It is, as always, extremely appreciated. I will be ignoring this note because of the vibes. Thank you, have a nice day, Stet. And it's like, I reserve the right at some points to be like, you know what, the vibes need to trump the exact historical minutia of a moment, because at the end of the day, I am a storyteller, and I want to take you on a journey with me.
Yeah, and I have to say that I didn't even know about this. When I read, I can promise you that was the last thing that I was thinking about. I was thinking about, oh wow, they really killed everyone in this church. Like,
yeah, they did.
I couldn't think about something else. But it's great that you actually make this documentation and you have a team that helps you to make it current possible.
Well, I try, and also, I mean, my goal is to create a movie. So a movie plays in my head. And then my goal is that the exact same movie plays in your head. Not the imagery alone, but the way the camera moves through the scene, the atmosphere, the color palette, the score. We are trying to create a hallucination together. And so my job is to pick specific details that help your imagination fill in the gaps between those details so that we can have a shared hallucination.
So yeah, no one will change ever your mind, no worries. I have to ask you, Victoria, now that we met our last story, I know that you're working in the third book of Vicious, that you're working in other projects, but I know that this book for sure was a challenge after Adi LaRue, how big it became, that you probably had toured for more than a year. It went really, really big here in Spain as well. It was a crazy book. Everyone was asking for it at the bookstores. I remember that because I was working in a bookstore at that time. How was for you to sit down and create a new story after everything that happened? Did it affect you in some way? Or you already, when you had the story, was like, yeah, I will forget about anything and focus on this one? How was for you to?
It affects everything. I am a deeply anxious creative. I think I am lucky that my first book was not a bestseller, nor was my second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. My first book to hit the New York Times list in the United States was my 9th. It hit for 1 week and was gone. Adi LaRue is my 20th. Look, it is without a doubt the most, the broadest reach of all of my books. And I think some of that is, I worked really hard on it. I spent 10 years on it. Some of it is luck. Some of it is context. I'll tell you this, I have not worked harder or less hard on any one of the other 25 books that I have now written. I have put the exact same amount of my heart and soul into every single one. That's one of the things that it can bring you sanity, or it can bring you insanity, right? I was just in Prague, and an interviewer asked me, to my face. She said, I remember it, it's now burned into my memory, it will live there forever, I will share it with you now. Given the success of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and the fact that you'll almost certainly never achieve that kind of impact with a novel again, how do you find the will to write new books? Sit with that. Okay. Now, is that a question I ask myself in the dead of night sometimes when things feel hard? It is.
Oh.
Do I want to be stabbed in the front with that question? No. So I think here's the thing. As an anxious person, the question that actually, the comment that actually lives in my head rent-free, that whispers to me in the dark of night is this. They will say your last book was better. That is the fear. And so I have to challenge myself every single book in a new way. Growth is not vertical. Growth is expansion. So I will never try. People are like, why don't you just write a second book that feels exactly like Addie LaRue? I could, and I won't. I don't want to repeat myself. I'm not playing paint by numbers with my stories. I'm trying to do something new each and every time. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's anxiety-inducing. I knew that the book that came out right after Addie LaRue was essentially a sacrifice. I wrote a book called Gallant, which I love. It is as different from Addie LaRue as it could possibly be, and because of that, people hated it. And then a really interesting thing happened. 3 years went by. And now when people pick up Gallant, they love it, because it's not in the shadow of Addie anymore. My goal is to write new books to get out of the shadow. I love when Addie LaRue is everyone's favorite book. I love it because that book took a pound of soul from me. But I don't write stories for that reason. Every single time I sit down to write a book, I have a new reason to write, and none of them is, I want to sell more books. I want to sell enough books that I get to keep doing this, obviously. This is amazing. But I'm not sitting there with a calculator being like, Addie sold this number of books, and this book sold this number of books, and therefore this book is not worth working on. It's not how I create. I am trying to build a house, and every book is a room in that house, and I am continuing to add new rooms, and I think that I try really hard to remember that. So, I have a really complicated relationship with Addie LaRue because for 10 years it belonged only to me, and now it belongs to everyone else, and now it feels like it doesn't really belong to me anymore. And I think that's probably healthy for me, but it does make creativity challenging. And here's the weird thing. I think people's relationship to my work is also continually evolving year over year. I'm certainly evolving year over year. I've been doing this since I was 19. And I'm 38. I've written 27 books that are published or will be published in the next 12 months. It's a lot of books. It's a lot of context. It's a lot of experience. Bury Our Bones is technically set in the same world as Addie LaRue. There is a cameo. It is part of what I'm calling the garden. The garden is a set of interlocking standalones. So books that you will be able to read individually, but if you read them together, you will start to see more. Okay? So I'm not done with the garden. And I'm really curious to see if people's relationships to different books in that garden changes over time as there are new additions to it. Each book, I think, will reposition itself a little bit. But each book is also designed to be read entirely on its own, and therefore you can have your own experience with any of the books. So I set challenges like that for myself so that I continue to grow as a creator, which is, I think, all that I can ask for.
I have to say that it's really amazing how you create each story really differently, that they have their own personality, and you put part of yourself on one of these stories. And I think that creating this garden for us readers to actually enjoy and discover book by book is thanks to how much of yourself you put in these stories. For example, in Bury the Bones, I remember you said that it's one of your most personal stories, and now you told us that each character represents each part of your life. So I'm also a huge fan of Avi LaRue, and it was a book that also meant a lot for me, but most of the books that I read, even being really different, even the main characters being really the opposite of the last books you released, you always find a way to connect with us because we connect with you. So it's really easy to actually, feel the connection with your stories.
Thank you. I mean, each book is written for a different version of myself, and that means that the beating heart, that connective thread through all 25 books is me. So I love that I have been so fortunate. I have some readers who read one of my books. They're like, that's the book. I don't need to read any of the other books. I don't want to. But I have some readers who have read a dozen, and they can say, oh, are all 12 the peak for me of that mountain? No, but they don't all need to be, because I get to hear your voice and experience your stories in each and every one. Also, books become static time capsules and creators continue to grow. And that also applies to readers. Books are static, but readers continue to grow. And one of the most interesting things that will happen is somebody will pick up one of my books at one age and then reread it again at a different age and have a different relationship to it. And I love that. I love that because as the author, I control 50% of the experience. I control what I bring to the words on the page. I will never control the other 50%, which is what you all bring to the words on the page. Your life experience, where you're at, how you're feeling, where your head is, what you need, what you want. I can't account for those. It's not a part of the formula in my control. I can only control what I bring. And that makes the relationship with the work ever-changing. And I love that. I love that you can visit or revisit or put down or pick up and be at a completely different place in your own journey in life and bring a completely different 50% to a book because it means it's not really static.
Wow. Okay. I will throw you one last question and then we open questions to the public.
Okay.
20 years writing books, more than 20 books actually. From the first one to the last one, you keep writing fantasy. You are a fantasy author. I really want to ask you how every time you sit down to write a new book, you come up with a new magical system. You go for it. You write about vampires, ghosts, magical creatures, monsters. You are trying every time something new. How these ideas come up to you?
Honestly, I think we talk about ideas as like a meal. But ideas are ingredients in the meal. And so I'm constantly foraging. I'm constantly collecting ingredients for the meal. I have a little rule for myself, which is that if I'm going to write a supernatural element, I have to make new rules. So when I'm writing the vampires in Bury Our Bones, I'm obviously like looking at the spectrum of rules that have been used to write about vampires, and then I'm analyzing and antagonizing those rules and saying what actually fits, what do I want, what am I getting rid of, what applies, what doesn't. And so I was like, I don't need them to explode into fire in the sun. I don't really get it. But I like the idea that it would weaken them, that it would sicken them. I decided for my vampires, I set a new rule for myself. For my vampires, the heart is the seat of everything. Now that's hearkening back to classic vampire lore in which you needed to stake a vampire through the heart to kill them. But I was like, the heart is a physical seat. It's also an existential seat. That's the heart of the humanity, the seat that starts to rot over time. Their heart has to be completely destroyed in order to destroy them. So I set rules for myself. One really specific to this book is very classically, vampires cannot enter a house uninvited. But because I'm writing a queer allegory at the same time, the last thing I wanted to do was create a space where queer characters could not come in. So I flipped the rule as well, and I said vampires can also believe in a place belonging to them so much that they can declare it theirs, that they can take control of it and protect it for themselves. So I'm honestly always kind of saying, from a really logical spot, what works? I don't ever have a rule in one of my stories for one of my entities or one of my creations, that's arbitrary. Everything is built in a kind of architectural fashion and then stress tested and made sure that it actually serves the characters in the story and has a meaning. Yeah. So I'm kind of always challenging that. So I'm now with the garden. I'm like, okay, this garden, let's take the metaphor. We know that old gods grow in the garden. We have Luke. We know that vampires grow in the garden. We have Sabine. So the question that I asked myself when I finished this book, that I wrote on a piece of paper that's tacked to my wall, what else grows in the garden? In a garden like this, what is an old god afraid of? What is the equivalent of a nourishing plant that feeds the soil? What is the equivalent of a strangling vine? So I just start to play out the metaphor and say, well, what else grows there then?
Wow, that's a really way to slowly start creating what's coming up next. I really love your garden, I have to say. So, Victoria, I'm gonna be quiet
okay, I have to put this in my...
They now will be free to ask you anything. Podeu preguntar tant en català com en castellà, té un intèrprete i van a passar.
Thank you very much. Really amazing what you do. I was asking myself the average time you read. You are 38, 27, and you started at 19. So the average time of a pregnancy looks like
basically
you get pregnant with your books.
Yeah.
So then you deliver them, and I call it almost an exorcism, if I may.
Yes.
So when you get rid of this kind of child or monster or fantasy, as you might call it, how do you feel? Are you empty? Are you full of your characters? Or are you really happy you got rid of them?
I would say it's more like, thank you. I would say it's more like relief. It is very much like an exorcism for me. It is something that lives in my mind that I then need to safely get from my head onto paper. And the entire time I'm trying to do that is a little bit like Atlas holding up the world. My arms are getting very heavy. I'm like, oh my God, don't drop it. It's gonna break. Please don't drop it. Please don't drop it. Please don't drop it. And I finally set it down and everything hurts. But I'm gonna be very honest. I am not good at not writing. I don't really just write because I love it. I write from a sanity perspective. I need the act of writing. I need the act of storytelling in order to make the chaos in my mind into order. It's if I don't write, that chaos has nowhere to go and it kind of turns on itself and it gets very bad for my mental health. And so writing for me is kind of like a creative bloodletting. I have to do it. Because of that, I am always working. It's not good for work-life balance, but I'm always working. And so it's like if I have one story I'm actively writing, I know what the next 3 are that I will write. So I don't have a lot of fallow time. I don't have a lot of downtime. It actually takes me an average of 2 to 3 years to write a book. But that 2 to 3 years is overlapped with other things. That first year of the 2 to 3 years is a brainstorming period in which I'm also working on something else because I plan the entire book before I write it. So in that 3 year, it's really 3-year overlapping circles for the entire career. And then somewhere in there, you get a book like Addie that takes 10 years. Well, obviously, I got the idea for Addie before my first novel came out, and Addie was my 20th book. So between getting the idea for Addie and Addie being published, I wrote and published 19. So it's a continuous thing. Is it a healthy workflow? No. Would I be institutionalized without it? Probably. Is this a thing that I do that is like a need more than a want? But I would say because of that, the thing that I feel, especially these days as the audience has grown, the thing that I feel is relief. I feel relieved to have survived the experience.
Thank you. We have, there at the end, there's a lot as well.
This room is bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah. Now that I'm looking to the end, there's a lot of heads over there as well.
Hi, I'm very pleased to meet you. Thanks to my friend introducing me to your work. And as a writer myself, I look at you and I am just in awe because it's not just the writing that you do, but like the traveling and the talking and the whole package. And I just want to know, first of all, how do you switch between the extrovert introvert piece, and also how much do you sleep?
So, fraught questions. Look, sometimes it's easier than others. I cried 3 times on the way to the airport for this tour because the night before I left, I received more edits for Victorious, and I felt just so tired at that point that, like, the harder the book is, the harder it is to do everything, right? And I'm not somebody who actively who writes well on the road. So there's a lot of compartmentalization in my life. I also, though, don't do well with stillness, so I'm constantly kind of towing the line of exhaustion because I don't do well with rest. So, like, my version of rest right now is I'm training for my first marathon, right? So it's the exact opposite of rest. The nice thing about that, though, is I have to sleep. Sleep is, like, non-negotiable for me. I need 8 hours or my body will break down. So I treat everything in my life as if it were a job, and that includes rest. Like, I have to. I will say I am somebody who is almost always multitasking. If I am on a long run, I am listening to an audiobook, right? I am doing both things at once. If I am on a plane, I'm making notes for my monthly newsletter. I write a newsletter in addition to novels, and it's very, very important to me. And I spend basically the entire month putting it together. It is not only about my life and my craft and my work, it's about everything, right? So I don't have a good balance. I am not somebody, in that same interview where they were like, how do you find the will to keep writing? She also was like, do you think you're a bad role model given how much you take on? And I want to just really reinforce, don't do as I do, okay? You should not look to me as a human as an inspiration. You can look to me as a creator as an inspiration. I am just white-knuckling life, right? I know that I need to be a certain level of tired. And so I embrace that. And then every now and then I tip 1 foot over the edge into absolute burnout. And I have to scramble backward and go, oh no, oh no, oh no, no. I have a friend who is flying to Scotland to spend a week with me later this month to make sure that I don't work for the week. Because she knows if I don't have a chaperone, I'm gonna work. I feel safe in work. I know that kind of fatigue. I know that kind of exhaustion. I know that kind of satisfaction. I'm not sure this will translate well, but I am not good at being a human being. I am very good at being a human doing. Okay? I am good at action. I am not good at existence. So, thank you, and it is hard. Do not use me as a model for anything outside of writing, please.
Wow. Thank you for your question. I think we have time for more.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Here?
Yeah.
Well, your last book is the first book I read.
Yeah.
Also, Interview with the Vampire was the first book I read, like willingly, not for school or something. So my view on vampire is Lestat and Louis.
Yes.
And I see like 2 types of character, like the one that embrace the power, that embrace the immortality, and the one that is tormented.
Yes.
And you see it also in Only Lovers Left Alive, for example. And when I read your book, I see Maria is Lestat, but it's not Lestat.
No.
It's more
Yeah.
than him. And it's like you see how will you say? Like, I know you read that.
Yes.
But you transcended it. And I don't quite remember, but the scene when Maria becomes Sabine,
Yes.
it's like the same, like when
No,
Louis,
I know. It's
like
a nod.
And Lestat says, stop, stop, and Louis stop, but Maria won't,
Yeah.
and I like it a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. I will say that I have so yes, there's a Louis Lestat element to Charlotte and Sabine, but what I was really interested in was the concept of collateral damage. I was so fascinated by the idea of like, they just have a warpath, right? They kill a lot of people. And like, what about the people that they left behind, right? What about those people? They were main characters of their own story, but when they enter like the Louis and Lestat sphere, they just become bodies. So I was really interested in what if you panned one foot to the left, and instead of the story being solely about the Louis and Lestat, it's about Louis and Lestat and that one person that they killed. And so Alice is a story of collateral damage. Alice is about what happens when your actions actually come back to haunt you physically.
I have to say that I didn't read the book that she mentioned,
Yeah.
so I didn't know that there was this parallel.
Oh, I mean, Sabine is built out of Lestat from Interview with the Vampire, Villanelle from Killing Eve, and Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine. That is Sabine's triptych generative character. She is built of those three people. And so, yeah, and that's why I think you were feeling that she's more than Lestat. Lestat is incredibly fragile as a character. He is so scared of loneliness. He feels everything so much that that's what makes him act the way he does. Sabine is the exact opposite. Sabine shines just as brightly, but not because she feels everything so much.
And we love her.
Do we have time for
Cerramos ronda de preguntas.
Well, we'll close.
Sadly. Thank you for giving us your time, for coming here, joining the festival, and
Thank
let
you
us
all for coming.
get to know you better.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. Gracias todos por
you
estar
so
aquí.
much. Thank you.
And she will be signing books. Estará firmando para si tenéis alguna que otra pregunta para ella. Es toda vuestra. So it's time for signing books, Victoria. Thank you very much. Gracias.